Welcome to our weekly online gathering for Mill Hill East Church. My name's Josh, I'm the pastor of the church, and it's great to gather with you for worship and community in this way. Over the summer, we're changing the rhythm of our gatherings slightly. At our in-person gatherings at 11 a.m. every Sunday at the church, we're going to have all-age gatherings looking at some of the parables of Jesus. And then after each service, we're going to do some fun social things together, like walk to the local park or have a barbecue or go to the local pub. It's going to be a lot of fun, so do come and get to know some new people. At our online gatherings, we're going to be rebroadcasting sometimes when we had conversations and looked through the 7 signs in the Gospel of John and thought about what Jesus was showing us about himself through those stories. I hope that both encourage you greatly. If you're someone who regularly engages with our online services, please click below this video in the description on the link and just fill in a short survey telling us what you've enjoyed about our online services, what you would change, what you would add in, so that when we start with some new content from September onwards, we can keep growing together as a community. I hope that it'd be good to see you soon.
It's good to have a chance to share with you and to be with you virtually, even if we can't be together in person. Today we're looking at John chapter 2, and we're looking at the wedding in Cana. And this is a wedding which very nearly goes horribly wrong, but sorry, I can't even...
It reminds us of our wedding a little bit because our wedding very nearly went wrong, but moving past that,
this is a wedding which very nearly goes wrong, but God really blesses the situation, and we learn so much about Jesus, and we also learn a lot about how we should respond. And Anne and I have been reading this passage together over the last week, and we thought we would share a few things which jumped out to us. But before we do, it might be worth saying, what's the big deal in this passage? What is the conflict? After all, why is running out of wine such a big deal? Well, contextually, the bride and groom were expected to be able to provide, especially at a wedding where it was likely that the whole village came together to celebrate. So to not be able to provide would have been a huge mark of shame, and it might also have been interpreted as a bad sign for the rest of their married life. So Jesus' act of compassion and miracle here is so loving and so gracious, because what might seem trivial from the outside would have been deeply powerful and deeply meaningful to those involved. So let's look at Jesus, and let's look at the Jesus revealed to us in this passage. Would you talk about that?
Yeah, so the first thing that that really stands out from this passage is actually quite a seismic passage in Jesus' story, because it's the first time that Jesus truly shows that he's God. You know, this isn't just some parlour trick, this is a miracle. It's heaven and earth coming together, and Jesus really showing his divinity. But I think we can learn even more about the kind of person and the kind of God that Jesus is by looking at where he chose to do his first miracle. So, you know, he doesn't choose to do it on top of a mountain in front of thousands of people. You know, he chooses to manifest his glory in a kitchen at a wedding. Like Micah says, it's a really personal miracle. And it reminds me of, I think it's a pattern in Jesus' story. You know, he was a king he's a servant king. He wasn't born in a palace, he was born in a stable. You know, he washes his disciples' feet. And when he saves humanity, he doesn't do that with pomp and you know, a big sword. He dies for us. So I think that this is a miracle which shows Jesus is God, but it also shows that he's a servant God. And so I think it's a really powerful story in that sense.
And he's not just a servant God, but he's a God that we can approach. And that was something else which really jumped out to us as we were reading this passage this week. I mean, Mary is a brilliant example here. Mary identifies a problem and she takes it to Jesus with confidence. And I think that we should feel encouraged to follow Mary's example, to take things to God in prayer. And I think in this time in particular, when, you know, so many of us are struggling and thinking about the future with a sense of uncertainty. A lot of us might have anxieties, some which are huge and overwhelming, and others which might comparatively seem more trivial. But we should be encouraged by this story to take all of these things to God in prayer. That's certainly something that God's been teaching us this week as we've been preparing for this passage. And not just to approach him in prayer, but also to be obedient to what he tells us. And he might tell us through prayer, he might tell us through his word, but as the servants do in this passage, we should be obedient to what he tells us. And, I don't know about you, but if I was the servant in this story, being told to, do these things with the, Jewish purification, water gallons, I couldn't say I'd understand why, but the fact that the servants do leads to such blessing and miracles. And I think that's a reminder to us that even when we don't always understand what God's telling us to do, but it is important that we follow him, we trust him, because that's the way that his love and his blessings can flow.
Yeah, and I think that there's a point there about his blessings and about the extent of them. Jesus doesn't just knock out a few bottles of wine. It's gallons and gallons of the best wine. That's what he produces. That's what God's grace is like. God's grace is generous. And the other thing to know is that we were thinking about the different roles in the story that we might play, and Michael was talking about Mary and the servants sort of working with Jesus and trusting him. But I think that we often fill the role of the master of the feasts and the bridegroom and the guests, receiving God's grace and not really recognising it for what it is. I mean, John says that the master of the feast doesn't know that Jesus is responsible for this lovely wine. And the irony is that Jesus would have been served the wine that he'd created. And so, I mean, it reminds me actually of a verse from 1 Chronicles, which is, all that we have comes from you, and of your own do we give you. Everything that we have, all the good things we have are from God. And anything we give to him, the wine that's served at this wedding to Jesus is from him. And so we really need to try and recognise in our life and be grateful for the generous grace of God.
He's our rescuer. He's our rescuer. We are free from sin forevermore. Oh, how sweet the sound. Oh, how grace abounds. We will praise the Lord, our rescuer. There is good news for the captive, good news for the shame. There is good news for the one who walked away. There is good news for the doubter, the one religion failed. For the good Lord has come to seek and save. He's our rescuer. He's our rescuer. We are free from sin forevermore. Oh, how sweet the sound. Oh, how grace abounds. We will praise the Lord, our rescuer. There's beauty for the blind man, riches for the poor. He is friendship for the one the world ignores. He is pasture for the weary, rest for those who strive. For the good Lord is the way, the truth, the life. And yes, the good Lord is the way, the truth, the life. He's our rescuer. He's our rescuer. We are free from sin forevermore. Oh, how sweet the sound. Oh, how grace abounds. We will praise the Lord, our rescuer. So come and be chainless. Come and be fearless. Come to the foot of Calvary. 'Cause there is redemption for every affliction here at the foot of Calvary. So come and be chainless, come and be fearless, come to the foot